Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Some quick housekeeping. Our book-selling partner outside is ready, willing, and able to sell you some books at the end of tonight's program, and there will also be a signing at the end of tonight's program. They're happy to trade you some money for some books, so don't hesitate. Okay. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sophia Nahlawi, author event coordinator here at the Pratt Library, and for the millionth time, thank you for joining us. This evening, I'm happy to welcome Bsrat Mezghebe to the Pratt Library to discuss her new novel, I Hope You Find What You're Looking For. The year is 1991. Eritrea is on the verge of liberation from Ethiopian rule, and in Washington, D.C.'s tight-knit Eritrean community, change is in the air. 13-year-old Lydia and her family are grappling with what peace after decades of war might mean for their future, just as they welcome Berekhet, a distant cousin newly arrived from Ethiopia to attend medical school in the States. With him comes a barrage of new ideas Lydia must confront for the first time about the stories of nationhood and the family she was raised on. Meanwhile, her mother, Elsa, a former rebel fighter, and the family matriarch, Mama Zewdi, must grapple with regrets long buried in the time their country has been at war. Elsa's path from Eritrea to DC was paved with courage and loss, and figures from her past on the front lines of battle begin to resurface. Mama Zewdi, who runs a successful injera business out of her apartment, finds herself re-examining her place in their little family for the first time, while Lydia, emboldened by Berekhet, becomes committed to uncovering the secrets of her and her mother's past, including the truth about her father, who was martyred in the war. This evening, Bsrat will be joined in conversation by well-read Black Girl founder, Glory Edem. Bsrat Mezghebe received an MFA in creative writing from New York University. Her writing has appeared in Garnera, the Paris Review, and the anthology Well-Read Black Girl, Finding Our Stories, Discovering Ourselves. Glory Edem is a literary tastemaker, entrepreneur, and advocate for diverse voices in literature. In 2015, she founded Well-Read Black Girl, an online platform and book club dedicated to celebrating the works of Black women authors and creating a supportive online community for readers. Under Glory's leadership, Well-Read Black Girl has grown into a nonprofit organization, hosting events, book festivals, and author conversations that highlight the richness and diversity of Black literature. As an author herself, Glory has contributed to the literary landscape with her best-selling anthologies, Well-Read Black Girl, Finding Our Stories, Discovering Ourselves, and On Girlhood, 15 stories from the Well-Read Black Girl Library. She's also the author of Gather Me, a memoir in praise of the books that saved me. Bookless writes, Mezghebe delivers a commanding first novel that beautifully captures the heart, warmth, and intimacy of the Eritrean community. And author Mecca Jamila Sullivan calls the book a gorgeous exploration of family, identity, and the complex meanings of home. In striking prose, Bsrat Mezghebe elegantly weaves several interlacing histories with clear-eyed tenderness, showing us how intimacy and connection can form the ground that makes true freedom possible. It's my great pleasure to welcome Bsrat Mezghebe and Glory Edem.
How's everyone doing? Thank you for being here. Bsrat, I'm so excited to talk to you again about this wonderful, wonderful book. And I'm going to ask you some questions that I've asked you before.
No problem.
But first, I just want to say congratulations again.
Thank you.
How many events have you done so far?
This is my 6th event, but it's my first in Baltimore, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you all for coming.
So as you all know, this is the second title on the Well-Read Black Girl Books imprint. I hope you find what you're looking for is a beautiful debut. And Bsrat, you're just a tremendous writer. I want everyone to know what was the origin story of this book and what inspired you to write it.
So my book is about a family, a multi-generational family of Eritrean women living in the DC suburbs. It's a novel, it's fiction, it's not my story, but it's inspired by my childhood. I grew up in DC in the 80s and 90s, and at the time it was the biggest Eritrean diaspora, the biggest Eritrean community in the diaspora. And it was a time. It was entertaining, it was drama, it was laughs, it was lows, and you know, it wasn't until I got a little bit older when I was talking to my friends who also grew up, friends and family who grew up at that time, I think we realized what an extraordinary experience it was, and also the experience, the stories that we heard from our parents and our relatives, and the kind of dramatic things that they experienced. I wanted to capture it, and the more I reflected on my childhood, I felt inspired. But I turned to fiction, which I think is really tremendous that way. I think it can do what nonfiction can't do, so.
So I'm gonna pull you all into the book a little bit. So the three main characters, look at my notes. There's Elsa, there's Lydia, and there's Mama Zewdi. Mm-hmm. And they really represent three generations of women who are kind of going through, trying to figure out their identity and how to find their place in the world. Can you tell us why you decided to have these three women really tell the story, especially because you do it in such an authentic way?
Thank you, thank you. It's really tricky to explain this book when people haven't read it yet, so apologies. I hope that it translates. But so the three women in the book, there's Mama Zewdi, who's the matriarch. She's on the cusp of turning 50 in the book, and she's never been married, but she's everyone's mother. And she's never been married, never had kids, but she's everyone's mother. And she is kind of exploring either a romantic relationship or pursuing a business idea. And she plays mother to a mother and daughter duo, Elsa and Lydia, and they all live in this apartment building together. I'm not sure why these characters chose me. I really do feel like they chose me. As I was kind of putting the book together, they came to me, but they each allowed me to kind of explore different things. Mama Zewdi allowed me to explore what is it like for a single woman who's a little bit older in a traditional society to find her voice and to live life on her own terms. Elsa and Lydia kind of allowed me to explore so many things, a mother and daughter dynamic, which is fun.
And complicated.
Kind of cross-generational drama. Mm-hmm. Elsa is a former guerrilla fighter. Most people don't know that in Eritrea's war for independence, a third of the rebels were women, which is no small feat. So she has, and it's real. And she kind of has a history that she doesn't share with her daughter. So it allowed me to tackle all that history. And then with Lydia, I got to have fun with being an American kid, in the 90s. And your parents just are not making sense to you, and that was fun. So so I got to do different things.
One of the questions that came up last time we were talking was, and it was such a great question because so much of the book is structured around 1991. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about what was so significant about that year in the Eritrean community?
So I see some familiar faces here, so some of us here know, but 1991 is the year, May 24th, that Eritrea won its independence after a 30-year war from Ethiopia. It was a long, hard-fought war. Eritrea is a small country. Every family was affected in the diaspora and back home, back in Eritrea. And, 91, it was a euphoric time. It was just, everybody was super excited, very socially cohesive, and it's hard to explain, I think, it now because I feel like our attention is kind of fractured all over the place and we're all focusing on different things. But it was a time for this one community, everybody was focused on one thing. Mm-hmm. And it was really beautiful to see. So I had to do it. That was the year, that was the month. Mm-hmm. There's no better time. And then from setting the story in May 1991, obviously I jumped back because I like to make things difficult for myself as a writer. So I tell the context of why the characters end up in America. But so it also jumps back in time to the 70s and 80s.
Can you tell us about the title? You know, I love I hope you find what you're looking for, because it just reminds me of, like, this doesn't matter, like, this goes across the diaspora, whether your family's from the South, whether your family's from East Africa, like, I hope you find what you're looking for, you know? Like, it's like this kind of calling for you to explore on your own. It could be a calling in, or it could be a reprimand. And so tell me why you decided on that title.
It's interesting, and I am curious. I don't know, I'll never know how people interpret the title unless you come up and tell me personally, so feel free after the event. The title came from a line of dialogue where Lydia's older cousin, Berekhet, he's the one person that she can kind of confide in, and she's telling him what she's looking for, what bothers her, what her mother won't tell her. And he says, sincerely, I hope you find what you're looking for. He means it sincerely. So it represents their relationship, and each character is looking for something. But I know that it worked. I liked it, but later on I think I realized that it does have this other meaning, which can be slightly sarcastic or skeptical, but it is meant sincerely. You know, each character is looking for something.
Yeah.
And you'll have to see if they find it.
Yeah. So you just mentioned BK, one of my most favorite characters. He's the one of the primary males in the book, and has such a strong presence, and really is a straight contrast to Lydia, Elsa, and Zewdi. Can you talk about shaping his character and writing in a male voice? Because I feel like you did it in a way that is very authentic, but it also just offers some levity and just a bit of, just a sharp difference to the other characters.
Yeah. So the book starts off with the kind of classic, a stranger enters the scene. You know, there's a stranger who comes off the, who enters, and at the time that the book is set in 91, around that time, before and after, there were so many new relatives coming, to the States or, Europe. And there's this kind of dynamic where Lydia has two mothers, and they're always telling her what to do. And then her young cousin comes, and it's like a breath of fresh air. He challenges everyone. He challenges the moms, the big mama, the mom, and what's my character's name? And Lydia. Lydia. He challenges everybody. I think there's something when you're a kid, and it's the first time you see somebody in the family challenge your parents, and you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do it. I see some family members here, but and there was growing up, when you grow up, in the diaspora, you might just have your parents, because you've been disconnected from all the generations. Like you might not have your grandparents or your uncles or your aunts, so you can't see like the full range of society. You can't see people challenge your parents' views of things. You know what I mean? They were like, well, I did this, and there's nobody there to confirm if they did or they didn't, because your uncle's in another country or so, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's and this is like a unique thing to being in the diaspora. And so what I wanted for BK, the role to play, is Lydia doesn't know she hasn't seen different generations. So she sees somebody 7 to 9 years older than her kind of challenging the elders, and she's like, oh, that's what that looks like, because there's this gap. So he plays the kind of critical voice. He challenges everyone, and he has a different dream for himself. Since the war is over, he can dream bigger. He can have different dreams, and that's a problem. Yeah. When you have dreams different from your parents.
Yeah. I always envision your cousin as BK.
No, he's not. I know. And my family's here, and I've told everyone in my family, this is fictional. It's fictional. I'm looking at him right now. But, he's inspired. Like, there's certain things that are inspired, but he really isn't. He's not. I know. But I had fun with him. Mm-hmm. There's certain things that I borrowed from, I created kind of composites, but I had fun with him. Yeah, I had fun with him.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about Lydia in that gap. I'm trying to figure out how to challenge your parents, or even create like an idea of what came before you. And one of my favorite scenes is when, she's visiting a friend's house who is American, and the young girl is talking very sharply to her mother.
Oh, yes.
And Lydia is observing this again, just in awe and disbelief that, like, she can talk to her mother this way and still proceed to eat like
To
Oreo
breathe.
cookies.
Yeah,
and,
to
like,
live.
Still live. Be
Yeah,
alive.
she's still alive.
Yes,
to tell the tale.
Because my mother would have had a very similar
absolutely not.
reaction, like, like Elsa. She would not have it. So you have these really relatable moments, again, whether you are, first generation from any country, that you are trying to kind of wrestle with your American identity and your native heritage, right? Talk about why that was significant for you to place Lydia in these positions where she's trying to figure out who she is.
Yeah, I think, so every character in the book has their thing. And for Lydia, this reviewer described the book, which I thought was so beautiful, as it was a coming of age story, and then also a coming of middle age story, because that's what's going on with the older characters. Coming of age story, everyone has the powers that be. We're all subject to an authority. And the most powerful authority when you're that age is your parents. They control everything. And 13 is that age where you start to, it could be earlier, it could be later, but when you start to really become conscious of a different reality, you can poke holes in what they're telling you. You have you have some wits about you. Your arguments start to make sense.
I started to curse a lot.
Oh God, to
I
your mother?
I had a cursing phase for no reason.
Directly to your mother?
No,
Oh.
never.
But you were.
I was out just in public. And I remember my mom.
You're testing it out.
I was testing it out, on
Yeah.
the bus, or I would just
yeah.
curse or say these just nonsensical, ridiculous
Yes.
things. And then one of my mom's friends caught me. Oh my gosh, it was awful. But
Terrible.
But you just try to. It's
You're
trying to.
You feel it. You're trying to feel what works and what doesn't.
yeah.
You have the confidence to kind of practice things that you've been absorbing for so many years. Oh my God. And so Lydia, it's natural. She wants to do that, and it just so happens that her mother is even more, maybe their dynamic is even more challenged because her mother has some secrets about their past and the circumstances of Lydia's father's death and things that she doesn't want to discuss.
Yeah.
So that's huge. That's about your father, that's about the other half of you, where you come from. And, you have, as a kid, you can try to be nice and try to ask gently. And if that doesn't work, then you try to be indirect and you try to act out to see what you can provoke in your parents. So I just wanted to let Lydia try different things. Try the direct approach. That's not working. Have an attitude. Yeah. See how that works with an African mom or a Black mother, or really any mother. But, and just to see, I'm curious if what piece sounds like, some people have said that resonated. And I think that's real. And as a mother, you have a choice too. How are you going to respond to your kid challenging you?
Right.
Do
you shut them down?
Yeah.
Do you open
Do you try to
up?
understand a little bit what's going on? Elsa also tries different things, but her first response is to shut down.
Yeah. So let's talk about Elsa some more. So Lydia is growing up and is American, while Elsa carries the lived experience of more or less displacement. She's in the U.S., she's trying to find herself in the world and also reconcile with her past. So, as you mentioned, there's a lot of misunderstandings that emerge between them. Can you talk about how Lydia's American identity allows her to do the things that her mother cannot? Just expanding on this idea of provoking or even exploring parts of herself that Elsa doesn't have access to.
Yeah, there's a scene in the book which I really loved writing. Lydia and Berekhet are on the National Mall, and they're going to a museum, and Berekhet says to Lydia, you're an American, and your life will always be a straight line. Politics will never affect you. Which, when I wrote this book, I started this book in 2014. 2015, so it's a different time now. So many things that don't apply like I thought they would. And that's also another point of the book that I'd like to discuss. But, that was the feeling that was communicated to me. You don't have to worry anything. You know what I mean? You're American. Your life is a golden stair, whatever the expression is. You know what I mean? You're just skipping down the road. Your world is your oyster, And that there's a freedom in that. There's also there's a softness to it that means that you're not necessarily prepared for everything.
Yeah.
But so Lydia has freedom. She has freedom to, imagine a life kind of abundantly whatever she wants. And I think that makes her mother happy on one hand, but on the other, when that freedom is directed towards her, to her mother, that challenges her. And so she has a heart, she's afraid for her daughter, you know, she wants to control her. So yeah, it was a fun dynamic to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really did appreciate the flashbacks and how you showed, you know, Elsa as this rebel fighter, but also as a mother, and just like the great sensitivity that she had. And throughout it all, you can just tell that like the novel is just full of family secrets, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone is trying to
Yeah.
navigate who they are and how and what to reveal and when.
Yeah.
And that, as a writer, is a challenging thing
Yeah.
to just, the word I'm looking for is pace out,
Yep.
right? Because you want to give people clues, you want to pull the reader into the story. How did you find a way to, again, go through these secrets that are complicated, that are full of family trauma, but also there are moments where, like, you will laugh in this book too.
Yeah.
Like there's so much laughter and levity too. So how did you balance all of that?
So in terms of like revealing secrets, that was trial and error. I had so many different versions of when things were revealed, when they weren't. It was chaos. It was so stressful trying to figure it out. And I just didn't want it to be like a gotcha, you know, like a cheap reveal or
Yeah.
a cheap thing, you know, where like,
Gotcha,
yeah, but you didn't know, and the person be like, actually, I knew, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I didn't want it to be like kind of obvious, but I'm trying to act like, you know, it was hard. I really struggled with that. So I tried to be careful about about when I did, and I just played around with it. And yeah, it was hard. Y'all let me know. Send me an email if you think I did it right. Or if I didn't. In terms, and also, this goes to your question about levity, you know, I really try not to make things like melodramatic in general. And I think if you're like, you could, you know, I don't want to stress people out. You know, like I think there's only so much you can take before you stop feeling as much. You know, you get desensitized. So I was very careful about that. And I also wanted it to feel true to life, which is life is dramatic and tragic and it's hilarious. And it's also boring. It's everything, you know? And this story is about regular people who happen to get caught up in a war. So life gets dramatic, and you're also worried about what am I going to eat, you know, what's for dinner. You have the ingredients, you just don't know what to, you know, it's like life is that mundane. What are we doing on Friday? And also, you know, you're at the midst of like a geopolitical battle, you know? So between global superpowers. So I had to, you know, that's life. You got to keep it light. People crack jokes, you know, that's what people do. Yeah, so if that felt kind of natural to me, I had an easier time with that than with the secrets.
Yeah.
Secrets were stressing me out.
Another one of my favorite characters that has secrets of her own, but her temperament is more forthright and transparent is Mama Zewdi.
Yeah.
And there's something so powerful about her because she's like running her injera business and her apartment. She's very like practical. There's this like immigrant resourcefulness about her. And at the same time, she is doing her best to preserve the culture and preserve community through the things that she does within her business. Can you talk about why it was important to have this detail, again, like her running the business, being so just like in charge and powerful? Why was that so significant throughout the novel?
You know, Mama Zewdi was my favorite character to write. You know, there's this like false, I think sometimes dichotomy about like the whole trad wife thing. You guys, I'm sure you're seeing it online. You know, there's this like false dichotomy about traditional versus modern. And what I wanted to explore to her is someone who is selective about when she wants to be traditional and when she wants to be modern. And the algorithm only makes sense to her, you know, and you just have to keep up. And she's the keeper of the flame. She is making all the food. She tells everyone what to do. This is how we used to do it in the old days. This is how we're going to do it. She's in everyone's business, but she's also
That's my favorite part.
Yes, she's in everyone's business, unsolicited advice. But she's also private. You know, she's in everyone else, but she's not telling everyone that she's has a suitor. She is an entrepreneur. You know, and you have to be very resourceful to do that. And she has another big business idea in the works. So I wanted to show someone who plays both, and you can't put her in a box. And in the end, she sometimes doesn't have a lot of self-awareness, which is funny to watch. But by the end, she kind of makes sense to herself, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So she was fun. Again, you guys let me know if what you thought about it when you do get a chance to read it. And I wanted someone like her to have her say, someone who does all the work in a family, who does all the visible and invisible labor in a family, to get on the mic.
It made me so excited to see Lydia take her in and see the possibilities of who she could become.
Yeah.
Like watching her and watching her mother, it just felt very empowering. One thing I didn't get an opportunity to ask you last time was why you decided to make Lydia so bookish. Like she's always carrying around books, and I loved at the end when you mentioned Andre.
Look at us! I can't even remember his name.
No, I have to look it up.
Oh my God.
I know it's
What is going on?
It's Andre. It's the French philosopher who
wrote the book.
It's okay. Give us
Andre
1 second.
Gide.
Gide, yes, Andre Gide.
Yes.
And so you have all these wonderful literary references that, again, you might have read in school or maybe not. Like how did you decide what books to put in her corner and just kind of fill her mind with?
So that was the one autobiographical thing that I put in this book. Again, this family, she's not me, and this family is not my family, but you, Miss Bookworm, you can relate. I was we're bookworms.
Yeah.
Just read, and also, that was my friend. Reading was my friend. And so when I was doing research for how to write about a 13-year-old girl, because I was struggling to write about a young girl, I thought about what was I reading. And especially as an only child, and there was no YouTube in the 91, they didn't have cable. Her mom wasn't gonna pay for cable. So she had to read, she had to read. And what a friend books can be. So I thought about the books I read. I mentioned Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which was like such a, that was like my book.
Yes,
oh my God, Cassie, yeah. Do you remember reading it and being like, what is it, chignon? I can't even pronounce it. Do you remember that? There's like a term for how you bun your hair. I just remember learning so many things. How do you pronounce it? Chignon. I was like, what is a chignon? This is amazing. That book to me will never leave me.
Oh, well, for me, I was so obsessed with the South. Like my parents are Nigerian, I'm first generation, but I always wanted to go to a family reunion. And my mom would be like, we are not.
Where are you going to go?
Where are you going to go? She's like, you want to go back to Nigeria? I'm like, no, I want to go down south. Like she would be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
But I would like show her the book.
Trees.
Eat a
pecans. You're like, I want to eat a pecan
I was
off
so
a tree.
eager for that, but what it made me do become like such a steward of history.
Yeah.
Like I was so eager to learn. Like I remember the first time I went to Memphis and Alabama and like really wanted to study and like touch red clay. Like I was so enamored with it, but it really started with that book.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
So I put that book in, and I think it's about a girl and her family. She's the only boy in the family.
Yeah,
the only
the
daughter
girl,
in
only
the
daughter,
family. Babysitter's Club.
Oh, yeah.
That was the thing. I went back to Nancy Drew. That I put myself there because I was like, okay, I'm gonna have fun. With Lydia. And that's her interior world. That's also how I explored her interior world.
Yeah.
And then that's how she bonds with BK, with Berekhet, who thinks her taste in books is terrible and makes her read.
Because he wants to get more philosophy.
Exactly.
He wants to talk about Buddha.
Exactly.
Like he has a different
and Stalin and all this stuff. And she's like, oh my God. Yeah. So that was fun. That was also a way for them to kind of bond. Before, I also want to make sure something we didn't get to talk about last time was the village.
Oh, yes.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. You okay? You go ahead.
We didn't get a chance to get into this, but it's been on my mind because, online everyone is talking about we need a village.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing this? Everyone is saying we don't have a village. We don't have a village. And then we said what?
You have to be a villager.
This is what I want to say.
Yes.
I saw someone online say, well, guess what, everybody?
Yeah.
You got to be a villager if you want a village.
Yeah.
And what I think is so brilliant about that, and what I tried to capture in the book is, it's nice to be the beneficiary of village services.
Yeah.
People taking care of you.
Or just being like being willing to be inconvenienced.
Well, that if you do it, you got to give it.
You have, yes,
You
it's like,
have
it's a
to-
reciprocal.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to show up.
Yeah.
You have to cook food. If you get the food, you got to cook food for everybody when your time is up.
But yeah, and that's what
And
Mama Zewdi is doing throughout the
This is
book.
what I was like, the cost of being in a village, because this book, it's a real urban community, and that's how I grew up in the 90s. Some of my people here, like, it was a real metropolitan village. Like, we were real villagers, but the cost of that is your time,
Yeah.
your money, and your personal preferences.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you don't, the cost of that is you're outcasted.
Yeah.
And that's a high price. You know what I mean? So it's real to be included, to be in the pack. You have to give a lot of it, and that's kind of what all the women are going through. It's that struggle between what you want and then the cost of being in the pack.
Yeah.
And how do you trade off?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing too, because I think with technology and the illusion that we're all connected, the physical, like tangible things of being like truly close together and showing up, it gets less and less, because it's like, oh, I saw them on Facebook, and you're like, actually, it's not the same thing as going to someone's house. Yeah.
Get off your sofa.
Yeah.
You can't watch TV. You got to get up. I mean, I'm not doing,
Yeah.
but it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think throughout the book, though, the circumstances are more dire, that it requires you to be there, because, again, you're here in the United States, but you have people back home in Eritrea like, that don't have that luxury of just kind of like, waiting for someone to come,
Yeah. But it's true of like any people who are not near home, like Warmth of Other Suns, was such an amazing book to read.
The Great
like,
Migration. Yeah.
Everyone from, everyone in LA from Houston is connected,
Yeah.
And they're all looking out for each other. And I was talking to somebody in Detroit, somebody in DC, like, all the Detroit people in DC of a certain age know each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
like they're
believe that.
all connected because the way this person was describing it to me is like, he was like, we are displaced people.
Yeah.
It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That that's how you're describing yourself, but
It's true,
if you end up somewhere else, you just start, you're there for each other.
Yeah.
You hold on to home.
I feel like I'm telling on myself. Another place I wanted to be from, I was also very obsessed with Chicago.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to live in Chicago. I love.
Was there a certain era?
It's just same thing like Detroit, just like the culture of it, like the aesthetic.
It's like a real strong subculture.
Yes, it's like so beautiful, and I mean, there's just so much. But
Yeah.
this is not about me.
No,
Right?
let's talk.
I want to go back to.
Excuse me.
Well, I also want to talk about this present moment, right? So we have, in the novel, it really shows the community in Washington, D.C. during this moment of hope. And it's like sitting at this kind of cusp of hope for their homeland, but hope for what they can achieve here in America as well. And there's such a complexity when you're trying to figure out the tension between the promise of something and what it really is. And as we're watching things unfold in the current political climate, it's like the promise of America versus what we're encountering now. How do you think you were able to, gosh, it's such a, it's not an easy question, so I'm not expecting you to have like the answer, but when you're trying to unpack the quote unquote American dream, what do you think you were writing towards? And now that the book is out and we're experiencing this present moment, has your views changed? Would you have done something differently?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. No, I wouldn't have done anything differently, but I was trying to capture a really hopeful, two things. One, so like I said, I started this book in 2015.
Yeah.
And also the way that I grew up in America, like we all did, the sun never set. And we're the only kind of, top, the countries in North America and Europe, we're the only country that is not preoccupied with our past. You know what I mean? Like Europe, they're all, their glory years were behind them, but we're like, we're always looking ahead. And that's how, that was my time. That's how we grew up in America. And this is the first time after I wrote the book that I feel like people are starting to question the strength of that vision.
Yeah.
Partly
assimilation. Moving here in the first. But and also
So when I was writing it, what I was trying to capture was, you don't necessarily want to leave home. None of these characters wanted to leave home.
Yeah.
They had no plans on leaving home, but they became kind of victims of history.
Yeah.
Certain things happened.
Yeah.
And so they had to make really difficult choices, and they had to go elsewhere and make a home for themselves. And they did it. They succeeded. And it wasn't what they planned on doing, but they had to figure out where to go, how they were going to make a living, and how they were going to kind of, still be themselves, still kind of be themselves and raise their families. And that's kind of part of what they're all looking for. And they did it. And I think what I was trying to say is everyone is just trying to make it work. Sometimes you're at the mercy of history, you're at politics. And the political kind of chaos of the time affected their personal lives, and they made it happen. I don't think that, I wouldn't have written that any differently now, but I think what I do want American readers to think about is to just, which I think most Americans have a great deal of sympathy for, but is to really think about what would it feel like if you felt like you couldn't stay home anymore? Like if you couldn't be here, how would you think about starting over somewhere else?
Yeah.
How would you do it? Would you decide to stay and try to be a hero? Mm-hmm. Would you be a collaborator, or would you leave? And I want people to really think about that, all these things we see in the news that are headlines about things that are happening abroad, they're just headlines, but these are regular people just like you, who are trying to figure out their lives. So I do hope people have sympathy for regular folks who are just trying to live their lives. Yeah. I hope that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that is what is really powerful about your book is it does feel like a new way to look at the immigrant narrative. And again, because you have these like very clear viewpoints from these three characters that are in a way in contrast to one another, but there's so much love there too. And I think that's another part where the title of your book comes up, because it feels hopeful, you know, no matter what they experience, the trauma, the pain, the challenges, the joy, they always seem like they're leaning towards like hope and love for one another, for their community, for their individual lives. We've known each other a long time, and I was very familiar with the story and history of Eritrea, but the struggle for independence isn't necessarily widely known in the American consciousness. Can you talk about why the Eritrean diaspora community was in a lot of ways it felt invisible, and it hasn't been told in the mainstream narratives about immigration. What does it mean to you to center your history in this way, and how do you think it can make an impact on American literature?
I thank you for asking that. When you're like, I remember growing up at a time where our country wasn't on the map.
Yeah.
So we were telling people, you just imagine just like here, we all had a little thing that we would do to try to explain to people, where Eritrea was. So, we had to be aware of everyone else's story, and that's a African thing, that's a Black thing, that's a, when your position of privilege, the less you have, I think have to be more familiar with everyone else's story. So I think we as a necessity, out of survival, we had to be. But it's a real privilege on so many levels to be able to tell this story, because there's so many concentric circles that I see. I think if you're from this area, an Eritrean, and I think it's really beautiful to tell the story of people who make up the social fabric of your community. Your doctor, your nurse, your Uber driver, your cab driver. Before we had parking lot machines, a parking attendant. It's important to know kind of the stories of the people around you, just as it's super important. I can say it's all connected. It's important to know it's Black History Month. It's important to know the history of the people who made it possible for African immigrants to have a life in this country.
Absolutely.
The only reason why, an Eritrean immigrant could have, I'm here because of product of Eritreans, because of the civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
We have to know that story.
Yeah.
You know, it's American history, you know, and I think it's better to expand, to broaden the fabric, you know, than to kind of cut it into pieces or to narrow it. So it's a privilege. I see this as like American history, you know, modern American history, because it's, you know, we're here, you know, so, you know. You gotta plant the
I feel like
flag.
that's the slogan of the night. We're here.
Yeah, we're here. What are you gonna do? You know, I mean, you know, that's the story. I mean, this is a country of, you know, of different people, of immigrants, of people who were either forced to come here, people who chose to come here. So let everyone have a say.
Absolutely.
You know?
And with that, we're going to allow you all to have a say. So if you have a question, Sophia's in the audience with a mic, or if you have a comment or you just want to say hello to Bsrat, please come up and say hello. While that is coming together, I'm going to ask one more question about. I know you said this is not autobiographical, but like, what was like left on the cutting room floor? Because I saw earlier versions of this, and I saw so many different structures.
Yes.
And I have to tell a confession. I felt throughout this process, I was always like in Gina's ear, like, what about this? What about this? Because I was like a little nervous. I was like, I don't want to tell this directly.
Yeah.
So I was like using Gina as like the middle. The
Gina,
middle is the editor. She's amazing. And this was such a new experience for me, editing, but also because you're my friend.
Yes.
That I felt so tenderhearted that I was, when you would
Thank you.
ask, sometimes when you would ask me things, I'd be like, wait, Gina's gonna tell you.
Yes, I was very sensitive. Thank you.
I know. So maybe we could talk about just like your journey to publishing this book as a debut writer. How long did it take you, and what the process was?
Before I answer that question, there's one thing I didn't get to say in my last answer, which is it's a credit to the literary community that you built. Seriously, Well-Read Black Girls selected this book in partnership with Norton to kind of expand the voices that get published. So cheers to you.
I love you. Yes.
You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So I started this book in 2015. My family knows, who's all here, that they were wondering why it took me so long to write this book. I made it, guys. I made it. I'm on the stage. Thank you, guys. I made it. All right. And I just wasn't, that's them right there. I had a totally another career, international development and consulting, was not a creative person at all.
You were always a creative person.
I was a reader.
You were always been a creative person.
And I watched a lot of TV.
And you're very funny. I also feel like if Bsrat didn't write this book, she could be an improv, you could be a little comedian.
Absolutely not.
Some satire.
Absolutely not, if the camera's on.
You know.
So I just consumed a lot of culture, but I didn't create. But you know, I got the itch. I was like, something's not quite right. I gotta, you know, work wasn't satisfying me, so it took me a very long time to figure out what it is I wanted to do. I took little community writing courses here and there while I was working, and then I decided I'm gonna just quit my job and figure it out. It was scary. Everybody was like, "What's she doing?" And then I got my MFA and I went back to work. So I start this, when I say it started in 2015, that's when I actually started the manuscript, but exploring writing happened much earlier. And I didn't get signed, I didn't get my agent until 2018. I didn't sign with Live Right until 2022, and we didn't finish the book until 2024. So for everyone out there who's interested in writing, keep going. It takes I think we focus on the stories of writers who get a book out in like a year or two.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, but most people I know, it takes a very long time of just hustle and quiet work alone.
Yeah, a lot of revision.
Yeah.
A lot of revision.
A lot of revision, sitting by yourself, you and your computer, working on something that no one might ever read, that no one cares about. No one cares if you showed up to your computer or not. Nobody cares.
But you have to be accountable to yourself.
It's yourself.
It is such like beautiful self-discipline.
Yeah.
And I also feel like your book is in conversation with so many of the greats. Like I think Chinamanda,
she was my inspiration for sure.
Minjin Lee, Pachinko.
Her as
I
well.
think about Edgewidge Dandicat. Like there's so many wonderful stories that really talk about a generation of people and their homelands and what it means to, like you said, be displaced or try to live in a different land. And that's what, I mean, outside of just being my wonderful friend, that was another reason I was so drawn and compelled to like publish and work with you, because I was like, oh, people have to read this. And I really believed in it from the very, very beginning.
Thank you. I love also multi-generational stories. I love stories where you have to look back to
Yes.
kind of understand the present. But then once I started writing one, I was like, oh,
It's hard.
no. Why did I do this? This was a bad idea.
But you did so much research, too.
I did, but it takes a long, it took me a long time. But yeah, I did a ton of research, interviewed
Yeah.
too many people, actually. Yeah.
Can you name some of the historians or the people how did you go about that process?
I interviewed Elsa Tesfaye, who was kind of the preeminent historian in Eritrea, who's wonderful. And then there's a research center in Eritrea. They connected me to a bunch of former freedom fighters who I interviewed, guerrilla fighters. But there's plenty of people here, people in my family, community members. I mean, I interviewed anybody who would let me kind of pick their brains, you know, and just kind of piece, you know, somebody tells you one little thing. You can talk to someone for like an hour, and they just tell you one little detail about somebody's earring, you know, and I don't even, you know, it gets lodged in your subconscious somewhere, and then like a year later, it would end up
in the
in a page, and it totally unrelated, you know. That's the kind of Frankenstein thing about putting together something like this. But it was intense. But I will never do this again. Not like this. Not like this. I think I was telling Gina, I was like, the next time I write a book, I will write it no back. What's it called? No flashback.
No flashback?
No we're telling it straight. Wake up, walk out the door, just go to work. That's it.
Your flashbacks were excellent. It was good.
This is terrible.
And we have a question. Thank you for asking a question.
Hi, I had a question about the men in the book, because I know you talked a lot about, mostly, you know, I know it's written through 3 females, but I wanted to see how did the men complement the women going through their journeys, like, they support, was it good, bad, were they traditional, were they for the, you know, modern times and stuff, so that was my question.
No, that's a great question. It's different depending on the 3 characters. So for Mama Zewdi, she had a really loving, what we see with her is she has this kind of loving relationship with her father, but he's killed when she's very young because of the war. And then she has this like one early suitor in her life, and it doesn't work out. And then we find her at the age of 50 where she's exploring a business opportunity and also a new love. So she kind of has like a neutral relationship. Men aren't holding her necessarily back from anything, but she is kind of experiencing like a patriarchal culture, generally, I would say. Where it gets a little bit more interesting is Elsa. Elsa, you know, her father died and was raised by her uncle. And her uncle is very, very domineering and tries to, you know, really he wants her life to go in a certain way. And because of that rigidity and her frustration, she ends up joining the war. But what we see there is it's really, what she learns later is that his control was really a form of love and protection and fear for her safety. And it's complicated because he was really harsh on her, but he was responsible for her. So I was trying to tell a really nuanced story of how fathers, you know, and its parents, it was more of a generational story of how each generation is trying to impose their will on the next generation out of fear and protection, not necessarily out of like cruelty. So again, it's not really gendered, but it's just a more generational thing. And for Lydia, her big breakthrough is meeting her cousin Berekhet, who's the stranger who gets off the plane. And that's like her first real friend in life, and the person who's actually asking her challenging questions and is curious what she thinks about things. And he opens up the world for her, which is a really beautiful thing. So yeah, the men are supporting figures and kind of catalysts, I would say. Not really bad guys, because that's kind of an easy story to tell. I think people are more complicated than just good or bad. So I tried to show how sometimes the people in your life who you think are boogeymen, if you go a little bit deeper, there was something else to it, you know? So that's what I would say about the men.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. I was like, well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for like choosing women who are like in non-traditional conditions for the protagonist of your story. I feel like that's not something we see from a lot of East African stories.
Yeah.
So love that.
Thank
and I hate to ask my question because I don't want to belabor men in this point.
Yes,
but,
no problem. I'm happy to.
I don't know. I just kind of wanted to talk about something you guys talked about earlier, which was like the cost of being a villager. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to ask, like, you know, how does, like, I mean, I know, like, how does that, like, look, and how do we feel is it different between, like, men and women, and how does that present in your book? So, like, when I think of showing up as a village, I think of, like, very, like, traditionally, like, feminine behavior, so like making food, showing up, or like, you know, emotionally and like being empathetic. Like, how is that something that you see like different between like the characters of your story and also like, I mean, and yeah, I was like, I'll just leave it at that. And like, how does that look between, you know, an immigrant, like a first generation immigrant community versus like a multi-generational immigrant community?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's
it's a great question.
no, that's really That's a good question. I never thought about that, but it's very. I do see the kind of gender take on village activities. But I think everyone has a role to play. It doesn't work if it's just the women. I mean, women carry a lot of the load, and that's also not what I experience. I've seen both, but in my own family, I have a lot of men in my family, and they are amazing villagers, you know. They're doing a lot of work. So, you know, it's funny, because I told the story from the perspective of women, I am leaning in on all the work that they do. And I think especially in immigrant communities, there's a lot of like destabilization with gender roles, because women either have to, if they come from more traditional societies, they have to work, which they didn't have to work for a wage before. So that complicates the dynamics in the household. So it can make things interesting. I really, you know, I gotta think about that. But I don't think the book is a commentary on that. The book is not a I mean, it's a commentary on women and like the struggles, especially in immigration, that they face to kind of still find themselves and like deal with the conflict between their personal dreams and their realities. But I think men have a role to play in the village. Yeah.
And I will add too, I think that what is the part of the villaging is the conversations that are had. And I think something happens when men or women are having just, you know, intimate conversations with one another during challenging times or even joyful times that we might not, you know, witness otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, I think the conversations that take place during that are special. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one last question from our audience before we close out, so take it away.
Hello. This was an interesting evening. Thank you for just telling us the process of the story. But one driving question for me, which I usually ask myself as someone who is hoping to tell the story one day, is what moves you? You talked about having to quit your job, having this thing at the back of your mind that says, I had to do this. What was it that would not let you go with this story till it took 11 years, but it's here?
Yeah. Good question.
It's a very good question. It changed throughout the years. In the beginning, it was just an amorphous, you know, when you got like a pebble in your shoe, you know, you're just like, there's something, you just like, so it took a while to figure out what that thing was. And then once I figured out that it was I wanted to write, and then I wanted to write this, it became clearer. Because then I was like, okay, there's that feels different from the ambiguous, like there's something I can't, you know, that's a really uncomfortable place to be in, because you don't quite know what is keeping you up at night. But something was keeping me up at night. Once I figured out it was this, then it was a different kind of anxiety, because I knew what I was doing, but it was hard. But I knew what I was doing. I mean, I knew the project that I was undertaking, but it was just hard. So what was keeping me up was, can I actually do it? And then, you know, you tell people about it, and a few years go by, and you're like, oh my God, why did I even tell anybody about it? So then it's sheer pride, you know, ego. You just don't want to not do it. You know, you just told too many people about it. You got to do it, you know? So it changed throughout the years. But I think but years, you know, a few years before I signed with Live Right, I detached myself from publishing. I said, you know, it doesn't matter to me if I sell it or not. I just have to finish it for me. Like, I removed myself from all of this. So I'm happy to be here, but I detached myself from all of this. This was not it stopped being my metric of success. It is very hard to sell a book in this day and age, you know, to publish a book. So I would say changing your definition of success helps tremendously. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep writing, or whatever the thing is.
We have time for one last question, which I'm going to pull from our online audience, which is, what are you working on next?
Oh. Somebody asked, what am I working on next?
What are you? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to catch my breath. I have a nonfiction book idea that I want to work on. That kind of involves this world, Eritreans also. Inspired by The Warmth of Other Suns, by the great Isabel Wilkerson's book, which I think is amazing. So I'd like to, but I have, some other, maybe film, some other fiction ideas too. But again, I don't want to tell anyone, because then you're going to ask me about it.
Please thank tonight's moderator, Gloria Adam.
Thank you.
And tonight's author, Bsrat Mezghebe.
Yes, thank you, Bsrat.